So let's talk about this upcoming album. It's called Waning Hymns. It's set to be released July 31st.
Correct.
Well, let's start off with the style of the album, because before we started recording, we talked about how this is a heavier album and one that may appeal to fans of heavier music and, drone and doom metal and stuff like that.
Yes, totally. This album is a lot heavier in that regard in comparison to the other releases. It's the funny thing about this album is we recorded this a couple years ago, and the themes seem more relevant today than when I even originally wrote these songs, which is kind of amazing. I mean, we're kind of always kind of more on the dystopian kind of vibe, but it's also trying to find hope within that dystopia, like within your own personal self, personal strength. There's a lot of information being thrown around at us daily that just kind of warps our minds, and we lose our track of who we are and our self-worth. And as they say, self-confidence is the biggest act against any kind of capitalism, because they don't want you to be self-confident. They want you to feel sad. They want you to feel like you can't do anything. You're not capable. And the most dangerous thing is once everyone starts realizing how capable they really are and the power that they have within that.
Was there a reason you decided to take the band in this heavier direction?
It's just kind of how it evolved. I started kind of getting more into drone music itself. And so I started to kind of dabble with it. And it's just kind of the direction it took, where all of a sudden we started adding these kind of dark folk kind of stuff, but then all of a sudden adding more delay and reverb to it. I started to kind of personally get inspired to see how I could create heaviness without relying on distortion. And so this was definitely an experiment in that.
And so what is the answer to that problem? How do you create heaviness without relying on distortion? What is it that makes something heavy even when you're playing on non-specific to metal instruments?
Exactly. Well, to me, what I found is a certain feel that can still be translated. And if you layer it with reverbs and delays, you actually put some real, the thing is, when you put some real human intensity into something, it doesn't matter what you're doing. And I think that's what gets lost. And when you're hiding behind distortion, sometimes that real human intensity can't get thrown through it because it's all distorted. And so like you bring that away, then all of a sudden it gets a little more raw, and you can get a little more droney, and you can get these trails happening. And then all of a sudden, oh wait, this isn't just heavy, this is getting psychedelic. This is all of a sudden opening other passageways in my mind, in my body, in my spirit. And that's kind of what I've learned, is just like using repetition. Repetition is huge, and just making sure that that there's this human intensity to it, and layering it with reverb. There's something to it.
And it is an extremely heavy album. I mean, I don't know how often you guys play acoustic sets or without amplifiers, but to me, this is the kind of album that even if you guys were given, acoustic guitars and without amplification, without any effects pedals, this would still be incredibly heavy music. There's a dark and ominous feeling to all of it. And, some of that is your vocal style, but a lot of it is just the kind of chords that you use.
Thank you. The funny thing that you say that is that just, that was another thought from when I was back to the origins. When I was hitchhiking and everything, I was thinking about that. I wanted to see if I could create a music that would have been heavy before amplifiers even existed. And so that's always been in the back of my mind within this particular project. So for you to hear that, it's rad for me to hear that. It's like, okay, cool, that is translating.
Let's talk about the recording of the album. You worked with Jeffrey McNulty and Mel Detmer, who you worked with on previous Geist albums.
Yes, they've become our team. Jeffrey McNulty over at the Kill Room Studio. We've been setting up over there for a while and doing our recordings there. And then we go over to Mel's studio, and she's just been done a great job on mastering, and she has a great list of other bands that she's worked with. It really drew us into wanting to work with her. Personal favorite is like Six Organs of Admittance or Sun or Earth or Master Musicians of Bukake. Although she's done a lot of stuff with Ivan Kang out here too. There's just a lot of good good weight that we wanted to kind of with, and she's been great too. So and they those two have just been kind of really working well together. Jeffrey does a good job with doing the tracking, and we get a good mix together. And then yeah, then Mel knocks it out.
This is an evolution in the sound of the band. Was there some adaptation in the recording process in order to compensate for that?
Oh no,
Did you guys do anything different for this album?
I mean, we always set up in a circle to play, but we had to put some baffles in front of our stuff because we were louder this time. uh, but no, I feel like because it was such a natural progression, it wasn't forced or anything like that. It just came together naturally how it should. And so, I mean, some of the songs at the time, they weren't completely finished. So that was fun. The original idea was for this particular album was to make a quick demo, but then it just became an album. And that's totally fine. It's just kind of, it's kind of the fun of being a musician. There's never really a straight path for anything, and you just got to roll with it.
Was this an album that came together fairly quickly compared to your other releases?
Well, I'd say it was done and ready to go quickly, but it was around for a while because we were feeling so for a while, like I was talking about before we started on the podcast. We were kind of more, we would be latched into the more psychedelic or rock kind of, or straight up rock kind of worlds and that kind of thing. And so we were feeling like with this particular work that was coming out of us, and we knew it was kind of coming, we just felt like it was time to maybe try to branch out to other scenes, because we know we can reach the psychedelic and rock communities and that kind of thing, but we wanted to kind of dig a little deeper within the drone and the metal communities, because we just kind of felt like there's still a kinship there to it. So I'm sorry, I completely forgot what your question was, though.
I definitely want to talk about your kinship with the metal and drone communities, but specifically to the recording of the album and the writing of these songs. Did this come together fairly quickly?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it was there. That's where I got off my tangent. So yeah, it was, but then we didn't want to just release it within those psychedelic and rock worlds. We wanted to try to figure out a way to kind of make sure this album would get exposed to other people besides just that specific group. And so it took a little bit of patience and figuring out, where we wanted to go with this and how to release it, where to release it. And then Joy from Ivnix and Scribe Recordings, she reached out to us, and then we just started chatting, and it all started to kind of really come together last year, and now we're ready to have our record released by the end of July. So no, it was kind of short, but not really.
Okay. So let's talk about the audience for this album. We discussed why I like the album before we started recording. I'm a big fan of stuff like Swans and Earth and droney heavy music, and this album is definitely that. When you play, who do you usually play with, and who do you think your audience is?
Well, that's a funny one. So we kind of play genreless bills, more or less. I mean, we can hang with the doom and some metal, but we're also playing with psychedelic bands, like I said, or straight up experimental bands, or electronic acts, improv acts, blues acts, world acts. We kind of go wherever. I mean, these days we have been playing more heavier bills because this album is kind of coming this way. And we've also been participating with this group out here in the Northwest has this festival called Thirst for Light, that was formerly called Thirst for Light, that really brings out, I guess, you call them forest punks, or you can call the goth, dark, earthen hippies or something, or hippies that wear black. uh, and that's definitely, and when we first played the first Thirst for Light a few years ago, that's when we really started to kind of touch on like, okay, yeah, this is kind of an audience for us for sure. We're really into everyone that's performing. We really like everyone that we've met, and this is really cool. And we had a really great response from our performances too. So it just kind of felt like, okay, cool, yeah, we're on to something here. We're in the right direction.
That's one of the things that fascinates me about the Pacific Northwest because, aside from 90s grunge and all that kind of stuff, when I first started hearing about the metal scene and the bands coming out of that area, there was there were a lot of bands that kind of crossed over into different things like drone, neo folk, apocalyptic folk, stuff like that. Bands like Alda and Agalok who were from that area. And so within the realm of just the metal scene in the region seems to hang pretty well with a lot of the experimental and noise and drone and that kind of music that's going on.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of how we fell into finding out about the people we're working with now. Just we were hanging on the more experimental psych side of things, and then noise kind of started to attract us, and drone, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, no, I kind of like some metal too. This is sweet. So it all kind of started to become this awesome melting pot of just sincere music. Which at the bottom line for me, I don't care regardless of genre. If it's sincere and you can hear the sincerity in music can be really a moving tool, and that's what I love with I'm listening and when I'm performing. Just like music as just this moving tool.